investment. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing amazing today. Before we jump in, quick disclaimer, like always, this is not financial advice. Investment. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just sharing information, opinions, and analysis for educational and entertainment purposes only. There are no dates, no rates, investment, no guarantees, and nothing in this video should be taken as a prediction of what will happen. Do your own research, make your own decisions. Investment, and never risk money you can't afford to lose. Now let's slow this down and unpack what that actually means, because a lot of times in this community, investment phrases like a Forex, international, or rate change get thrown around without context. People hear one sentence and assume it means overnight wealth, investment, instant exchanges, or dramatic price jumps. But the reality, and this is important, is that currencies don't just appear on global markets randomly. There are conditions, investment, requirements, and structural changes that usually come first. Right now, Iraq technically has more than one rate environment. Investment. There's the official rate set by the central bank, which is used for government accounting and official transactions. Investment. Then there's what people often call the parallel market or street rate, which can fluctuate based on supply, demand, and access to dollars. Investment. When those two numbers are far apart, it signals distortion in the currency system. It tells the world that the domestic currency isn't fully stabilized yet. Investment. So when people talk about one official rate, what they're really talking about is unification, investment, bringing those separate realities together so the currency trades consistently everywhere. That's a big deal, not just for investors or currency holders, investment, but for international trade, banking, foreign investment, and economic credibility. Think about it like this: investment. Imagine trying to do business with a country where the official exchange rate says one thing, but on the ground you actually have to pay a completely different price. Investment. Companies hate, banks hate uncertainty, investors hate uncertainty. A unified rate removes that confusion. Now, investment. Could that unification happen before or at the same time as broader international trading? Possibly. In many cases around the world, investment. Governments stabilize the domestic situation first, then allow wider convertibility. It's like fixing the foundation of a house before inviting guests inside. Investment. Another thing people ask is whether Forex automatically means a higher value, and the honest answer is not necessarily. Investment. Forex is simply a marketplace where currencies trade against each other. Some currencies are strong there, some are weak. Investment. Most move gradually based on economic fundamentals. What matters more than being on Forex is the health of the economy behind the currency. Investment. But here's where it gets interesting. Iraq is not starting from zero. This is a country with massive oil reserves, a young population, ongoing reconstruction, investment, and increasing integration into regional trade networks. If reforms continue, if corruption decreases, if banking modernization keeps progressing, as those factors could support a stronger, more stable currency environment over time. Notice the phrase over time, not overnight, not instantly, not magically. Investment. Now let's walk through a hypothetical scenario just to illustrate how a unified rate might emerge without drama. Investment. Suppose the central bank gradually increases access to foreign currency through official channels, reducing the need for people to rely on informal markets. Investment. At the same time, they tighten regulations on illicit dollar flows, strengthen banking transparency, and improve electronic payment systems. As those changes take hold, investment. The gap between the official rate and the street rate naturally shrinks. Eventually, the two numbers converge. At that point, investment, maintaining multiple rates no longer makes sense. The system simplifies to one rate because the market itself has stabilized. Investment. That process has happened in other countries before. It's not unprecedented, and it doesn't require secret events or sudden announcements. Investment. Sometimes it's actually quiet and technical, the kind of change economists notice before the public does. Now, another angle people bring up is timing. Investment. Why would Iraq want one official rate now or in the near future? Well, consider the broader goals the country has been pursuing: attracting foreign investment, expanding private sector growth, reducing dependence on cash transactions, and integrating with global financial systems. Investment. All of those objectives are easier with a stable, transparent currency framework. Foreign companies want to know that profits can be converted and moved reliably. And international banks want predictable exchange mechanisms. Trade partners want consistency. A unified rate checks all those boxes. But, and this is important, investment stability comes first. No country wants its currency exposed to global speculation before domestic conditions can support it. Investment, that would be like opening all the windows during a storm. Some viewers also wonder whether geopolitical factors play a role. Of course they do. Iraq sits at the crossroads of major regional interests, energy markets, and international alliances. Political stability, security conditions, investment, and diplomatic relationships all influence investor confidence, which in turn influences currency demand. Investment. So when you hear talk about a Forex readiness, it's not just about financial spreadsheets, it's about the entire national environment, economic, political, institutional, investment, and technological. Let's also address the emotional side of this, because I know many of you have been following this story for years, some for decades. Investment. It's easy to feel like every new headline could be the one. It's easy to get caught between hope and skepticism. One day you see progress, the next day you see delays. Investment, but progress in national economies is rarely linear. It's more like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Reforms get implemented, then adjusted, then refined. Investment. Governments change, policies evolve, external shocks happen, oil price swings, global recessions, regional conflicts. All of that affects timelines. Investment. So instead of asking, is it happening tomorrow? A more useful question might be, are the conditions improving overall? Because sustainable change is built on conditions. Investment, not announcements. Here's another example to visualize this. Imagine a train leaving a station. At first, it moves slowly, almost imperceptibly. Investment. If you're standing on the platform, you might wonder if it's even moving at all. But once it gains momentum, it becomes obvious. Investment. Economic transitions often feel like that, slow until suddenly they're not. And right now, there are indicators that Iraq has been trying to build that momentum. Investment, digital banking initiatives, anti-money laundering measures, customs modernization, energy sector partnerships, infrastructure projects, investment, and efforts to diversify beyond oil. None of those alone changes a currency overnight, but together they shape the long-term trajectory. Investment, another piece of the puzzle is public trust inside the country. If citizens prefer holding foreign currency instead of their own investment, it puts pressure on the domestic currency. Strengthening confidence in the national currency is crucial for stability. Investment. That can involve everything from controlling inflation to ensuring reliable access to banking services. When people trust their currency, they use it more. Investment. When they use it more, demand increases. When demand increases relative to supply, value tends to stabilize or strengthen. It's basic economics. Investment, but applied at a national scale. Now let's circle back to the phrase that sparked this whole discussion, ONE official rate investment. The reason it sounds dramatic is because it represents simplicity after complexity. For years, observers have had to track multiple figures, different markets, investment, and conflicting reports. A single recognized rate would eliminate that confusion. Would it shock the system? Probably not in the explosive way some imagine. Investment, more likely it would be presented as a technical adjustment, part of broader reforms, maybe even framed as aligning with international standards. Investment. And if you've watched how governments operate, you know they prefer calm transitions over chaos. Sudden volatility can hurt businesses, consumers. Investment. And political stability, controlled change is almost always the goal. So where does that leave us? It leaves us watching the indicators, not chasing rumors. Investment. It means paying attention to policy moves, banking reforms, economic data, and international partnerships. Investment. It means understanding that big outcomes usually come from many small steps. And honestly, that perspective can reduce a lot of stress. Investment. Instead of riding an emotional roller coaster every week, you can step back and evaluate the bigger picture. Because whether you're holding currency, studying geopolitics, investment, or just curious about global economics, the real story isn't about a single day, it's about the direction things are moving. All right, guys, investment. I'm going to pause right here because in the next part, we're going to dive deeper into what being on Forex could actually look like in practical terms. Investment. How currencies transition into wider trading environments, what mechanisms might be used. Investment. And why the phrase international doesn't always mean what people assume it does. Trust me, you're going to want to hear that. Investment, because it clears up a lot of misconceptions floating around out there. So first things first, Forex is not a button someone presses. Investment. It's not a switch that suddenly turns a currency into something magical overnight. For a decentralized global marketplace where banks, institutions, investment, governments, corporations, and traders exchange currencies, it operates 24 hours a day across different financial centers around the world. Investment, for a currency to trade freely there, certain conditions need to be in place: convertibility, liquidity, transparency, and confidence. Investment. Think of it like joining a professional sports league. You don't just show up and start playing at the highest level. You need infrastructure, rules, referees, contracts, investment, broadcasting, security, and financial backing. Without those, the league doesn't function. The same idea applies to global currency markets. Investment. Now, here's something a lot of people don't realize. Many currencies technically exist on Forex, but don't see heavy trading. Being listed doesn't guarantee demand. What drives trading volume is economic relevance, trade flows, investment flows, tourism, remittances, and financial activity connected to that country. Investment. So if Iraq were to move toward broader international trading of its currency, demand would likely come from real-world needs first: oil sales, imports of goods, investment, infrastructure contracts, regional trade deals, and cross-border banking activity. Those transactions create natural currency exchange requirements. Investment. Let's walk through a realistic scenario. Imagine a foreign company wins a major contract to build infrastructure in Iraq: roads, power plants, housing developments. Investment. They need to pay local workers and suppliers in Iraqi dinars. To do that, they must convert their dollars, euros, investment, or other currencies into dinars through official banking channels. Multiply that by dozens or hundreds of projects, and suddenly you have sustained demand. Investment. At the same time, Iraqi businesses importing goods from abroad might need foreign currency, creating flows in the opposite direction. When those inflows and outflows balance in a stable way, the exchange rate becomes more predictable. Now, why does the idea of O&E official rate matter in this context? Investment. Because global participants need clarity. If there are multiple rates depending on who you are or where you exchange, it complicates contracts and accounting. Investment. A unified rate makes pricing straightforward. Another big factor is liquidity, basically how easy it is to buy or sell a currency without causing large price swings. Investment. For major currencies like the US dollar or euro, liquidity is enormous. You can exchange billions without moving the market much. For smaller or emerging currencies, liquidity is thinner, so large transactions can cause volatility. If Iraq wants a stable presence in global markets, investment, building liquidity through banking relationships and reserves is essential. And this ties into foreign currency reserves. Investment, the stockpile of international assets a central bank holds. Strong reserves signal that the country can support its currency if needed. Think of reserves as a safety net. Investment, if demand for foreign currency spikes, the central bank can supply it to prevent panic. That stability encourages confidence from international partners. Investment. Now let's talk about convertibility, because this is a huge piece of the puzzle. Investment. A fully convertible currency can be exchanged freely for other currencies without restrictions. Some countries maintain partial controls to protect their economies. Investment. Moving toward greater convertibility usually happens gradually. Imagine opening a dam. You don't blow it apart all at once. You open the gates slowly to control the flow. Investment. Too much pressure released too quickly could destabilize everything downstream. Another misconception is that once a currency is internationally tradable, investment, its value must skyrocket. In reality, markets respond to supply and demand fundamentals. If exports are strong, investment is flowing in and confidence is high. Investment, value may strengthen. If the opposite happens, it may weaken. It's dynamic, not predetermined. Now let's address the emotional narratives that circulate online. Investment. Some people envision a dramatic overnight moment where banks scramble, screens flash, and everyone rushes to exchange. While exciting to imagine, investment. Real financial transitions tend to be more controlled. Authorities coordinate with banks, update systems, and communicate with international partners in advance. Investment. In many cases, by the time the public hears about a major shift, much of the groundwork has already been completed behind the scenes. Financial systems are like icebergs. Investment. Most of the structure is below the surface. Another interesting angle is technology. Iraq has been working to modernize payment systems, electronic transfers, investment, and digital banking. These upgrades matter because global finance today relies heavily on real-time data, compliance tracking, and automated settlement systems. Investment without those participating in international markets is difficult. Picture trying to join a high-speed internet network using dial-up technology. Investment, you'd technically be connected, but performance would be limited. Modern financial infrastructure ensures smooth interaction with global partners. Investment, now let's consider what this could mean for ordinary people inside Iraq. A stable investment, unified rate combined with broader international access could reduce price volatility for imported goods. Businesses could plan budgets more accurately. Investment, travelers wouldn't face unpredictable exchange conditions. Over time, that stability can support economic growth. But again, and I want to emphasize this, investment, these benefits come from stability, not sudden shocks. Governments generally aim to avoid disruptions that could cause inflation spikes or public anxiety. Investment, there's also the question of timing relative to global conditions. If the world economy is turbulent, countries may delay major currency moves. Financial investment, if conditions are favorable, steady trade, strong commodity prices, supportive international relationships, transitions become easier. Investment, oil prices play a particularly important role for Iraq. Higher oil revenues strengthen government finances and reserves, which can support currency stability. Investment, lower prices create pressure. So global energy markets indirectly influence currency policy decisions. Let's zoom out for a moment and think about confidence. Investment. Confidence is arguably the most powerful force in currency markets. If businesses and investors believe a currency will remain stable, investment, they're more willing to hold and use it. That belief becomes self-reinforcing. On the other hand, uncertainty can trigger capital flight. Investment, where money leaves the country seeking safer assets. Preventing that requires credible institutions, transparent policies, and consistent communication. Investment. Another point that doesn't get discussed enough is the role of domestic reforms beyond finance, legal systems, property rights, anti-corruption efforts, investment, and political stability. Investors evaluate all of those before committing capital. Currency strength is often a reflection of the broader national environment. Investment. So when people say, when it hits Forex, everything changes. The reality is that everything changing is what allows it to reach that stage in the first place. Investment. The listing is more like a milestone than a starting gun. Here's a helpful analogy. Think about graduating from university. The ceremony is visible and symbolic. Investment, but the real work happened over years of study, exams, and preparation. Without that groundwork, the diploma wouldn't exist. In the same way, investment, if Iraq achieves a single official rate recognized internationally, it would likely reflect years of reforms, negotiations, and capacity building. Now, investment, could there still be surprises along the way? Of course. Financial history is full of unexpected events, policy shifts, geopolitical developments, investment, technological breakthroughs. But even surprises usually occur within a framework of preparation, and this is why staying grounded matters. Investment. It's easy to get pulled into extreme optimism or extreme pessimism. A balanced perspective recognizes progress while acknowledging uncertainty. Investment. Let's also talk about patience, because this journey has tested a lot of people's patience. Large-scale national transformations don't operate on individual timelines. Investment, they move according to political cycles, economic realities, and institutional capabilities. If you zoom out and compare Iraq today to where it was decades ago, investment, there has been substantial rebuilding and reintegration. Not perfect, not complete, but significant, and currencies ultimately reflect the trajectory of their countries. Investment. So instead of focusing solely on a hypothetical moment when everything goes live, it may be more useful to observe whether the trajectory is upward stable, investment, or deteriorating. Direction matters more than day-to-day noise. All right, guys, investment. I'm going to pause here because in the next part, we're going to talk about the psychological impact of a single official rate announcement. Investment, how markets and the public might react, and what scenarios could unfold in the short term versus the long term. Investment, this is where we bring it all together and look at the human side of financial change, not just the technical side. Now imagine this scenario. Investment. The central bank makes an announcement that the exchange rate is officially unified. No more gap between the official rate and the parallel rate. Just one recognized number. Immediately, headlines start circulating, social media lights up, forums explode, YouTube goes crazy. Investment. But what actually changes in that moment? For everyday citizens inside Iraq, the biggest impact would likely be clarity. Investment, businesses would know exactly what rate to use for contracts. Importers and exporters would have a consistent benchmark. Investment. Banks would operate without juggling multiple pricing environments. That kind of simplification reduces friction in the economy. But here's where psychology kicks in. Investment markets don't just respond to numbers, they respond to perception. If people perceive the unification as a sign of strength and stability, often confidence can increase quickly. If they perceive it as forced or temporary, skepticism can creep in. Confidence is contagious. If citizens begin trusting the dinar more, investment, they may hold less foreign currency. That increases domestic demand for the local currency, and when demand increases relative to supply, Investment, pressure on the exchange rate can stabilize or strengthen it over time. Now let's talk about international reaction. Investment, global banks and financial institutions watch signals carefully. A unified rate suggests reduced distortion and improved monetary control. Investment, that can open doors for expanded correspondent banking relationships, smoother trade settlement, and increased foreign investment flows. But here's something important: investment. None of that happens in a vacuum. If the unification is accompanied by solid economic data, stable oil revenues, controlled inflation, and consistent policy messaging, markets are more likely to react positively. If broader instability exists, the response could be cautious. Let's break down a short-term versus long-term reaction. In the short term, volatility is possible. Anytime there's a structural change in currency policy, traders adjust positions. Some may speculate, some may hedge. Investment, some may wait on the sidelines. You could see movement as the market tests the new unified rate. But if the fundamentals support it, volatility tends to calm. Stability attracts participation. Participation increases liquidity. Liquidity reduces extreme swings. It becomes a reinforcing cycle. And now think about the phrase that gets people emotional: when it reaches Forex. A lot of viewers imagine that as a single dramatic flip of a switch. In reality, and broader international trading access often develops gradually. Banks expand services, platforms add currency pairs, trading volume builds step by step. Investment, there may not even be a cinematic moment. It could be incremental, almost quiet. And sometimes the quiet changes are the most powerful. Investment, because they reflect structural readiness rather than hype. Another angle we need to talk about is expectation management. When expectations are too high, investment, even positive developments, can feel disappointing. If someone expects a massive overnight surge and instead sees gradual appreciation or stability, investment, they may feel frustrated even though stability is actually a strong sign of economic health. This is where maturity in perspective becomes crucial. A stable investment, credible currency integrated into global markets, is more sustainable than a sudden spike driven by speculation. Let's walk through a hypothetical progression over time. Investment. First, unification eliminates the gap between rates. Next, improved banking transparency builds confidence. Then, investment. Foreign investment increases gradually as businesses see predictable conditions. Trade agreements expand, infrastructure improves. Over years, those layers compound. Investment. Compounding growth is powerful. It doesn't make headlines every week, but over time it transforms economies. Now let's address risk honestly. Investment, because ignoring risk doesn't make it disappear. Political instability, external economic shocks, global recessions, oil price collapses, any of these can slow progress. Currency management is dynamic. Policies must adapt to changing conditions. But that's true for every country. No currency exists in isolation. Investment. Even major currencies respond to global pressures. The difference lies in resilience, the ability to absorb shocks without losing control. Investment. Resilience comes from diversification. If Iraq continues diversifying beyond oil, expanding agriculture, industry, technology, tourism, that reduces vulnerability. Investment. The broader the economic base, the stronger the long-term currency outlook. Now here's a perspective shift I want you to consider. Instead of asking, when will it hit? Ask, what would a successful transition look like? It would look organized, transparent, gradual, supported by data. Investment. Coordinated with financial institutions, communicated clearly to the public. It would not look chaotic. Investment. Governments understand that sudden currency instability can create inflation spikes, public fear, and capital flight. So even if major policy adjustments occur, investment, they are typically managed carefully behind the scenes before being revealed publicly. Another human element here is patience fatigue. Investment. Many of you have followed Dinar discussions for years. You've heard rumors, predictions, timelines that didn't materialize. That experience can make it hard to trust new information. And honestly, that skepticism can be healthy. Investment, balanced optimism combined with critical thinking, is far stronger than blind belief or total dismissal. Investment. If Iraq reaches a point where it operates with one official rate recognized internationally, investment, that milestone would likely represent accumulated reforms rather than a surprise event. It would be the visible tip of a much deeper process. Investment. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough: economic transformation. Changes lives inside the country first. Investment, improved currency, stability benefits citizens through predictable pricing, business growth, job creation, and stronger purchasing power over time. Investment. The domestic impact matters more than external speculation. So when analyzing these developments, try to look through that lens. Investment. Is the domestic economy becoming more functional? Are banking systems modernizing? Is corruption being addressed? Are trade networks expanding? Investment. Those indicators often tell you more than rumors ever will. Now let's circle back to the core idea of this entire video: own official rate when it reaches 4x. Investment. The shock isn't necessarily in the number itself. The shock is in the clarity, in the removal of confusion. Investment. In the transition from fragmented pricing to unified recognition. That clarity could mark a new chapter in Iraq's financial integration. Investment. But integration doesn't mean instant transformation. It means participation in a global system governed by supply, demand, policy, and performance. Investment. And that's where realism keeps us grounded. There are no dates. There are no guaranteed rates. There are no secret clocks counting down. There is a process, economic, political, institutional, unfolding step by step. As observers, the best approach is staying informed, analyzing developments rationally, and avoiding emotional extremes. Watch the reforms, watch the data, watch the consistency of policy. Patterns reveal more than promises. Investment. If and when that single official rate becomes the norm across all channels, domestic and international investment, it would likely feel less like an explosion and more like a shift in foundation. Subtle but powerful, and sometimes foundation shifts are the ones that last. Investment. All right, guys, that's what I've got for you today. If you found value in this breakdown, investment. Make sure you stay tuned because we're going to keep watching these developments closely and analyzing them from a grounded, realistic perspective. Investment. Drop your thoughts below. Do you think unification comes first or broader international trading access? I want to hear how you see it. Remember, stay patient. Investment. Stay informed and always think long term. I'll catch you in the next one.